Road into Carter Land wasn't much of a road at all, just two rutted tracks, cutting through dry grass and low sage, baked hard under a Wyoming sky that never seemed to soften. By the time Josie Whitmore came walking down it, her boots were worn thin at the heel, and the dust had worked its way so deep into her dress it might never come out again. She hadn't meant to stop there. Truth was, she hadn't meant anything for days now. Not since the last town shut its door in her face. Not since the last woman looked her over and decided without asking that she wasn't the kind worth helping. Josie had learned not to argue with those looks. People saw what they wanted, and what they saw in her wasn't a woman worth trusting. Still, when she spotted the ranch house sitting low against the horizon, weathered boards, sagging porch, a fence leaning like it had given up the fight, she slowed. There was smoke coming from the chimney. Not steady smoke, the kind that stuttered, like someone trying and failing. Josie hesitated at the gate, one hand gripping the handle of her small carpetbag. The wood creaked when she pushed it open, loud enough to announce her whether she meant to or not. She was halfway across the yard when she heard it. A baby crying. Not the fussy kind. Not the kind that comes and goes. This was sharp, desperate. The kind of cry that scraped against your nerves and stayed there. Josie stopped dead. For a moment, just one, she told herself to keep walking. It wasn't her business. Nothing was anymore. But the crying didn't stop. It rose. Louder now. Breaking uneven like the child had been at it too long already. Josie exhaled slow, then turned toward the house. The door stood half open. She knocked anyway, out of habit more than hope. No answer. The crying carried straight through the doorway. She stepped inside. The first thing she noticed was the smell, burnt, thick and bitter, like someone had left supper too long on the stove. The second was the man. He stood with his back to her at the iron cook stove, sleeves rolled, shoulders broad, but sagging with a kind of tired that didn't come from one bad day. He was stirring something in a pot that had long since stopped being salvageable. "You're burning it," Josie said quietly. The man turned, startled. His face was older than his years, lined hard at the mouth, with eyes that didn't quite settle on her right away, like he wasn't used to seeing anything new. "I didn't hear you come in," he said. "I knocked." He glanced toward the door, then back at her, uncertain. "I was just—" he started, then gave up the sentence entirely. The crying cut through again. Josie's eyes shifted past him, toward the far side of the room. That's where she saw the baby. A little thing, maybe 10 months, red-faced and twisting in a makeshift cradle. Fists clenched, crying like the world had done it wrong. Beside the hearth, a girl sat cross-legged on the floor, dragging a stick through the ashes like it meant something. She didn't look up. Josie took a step forward without asking. "Can I?" The man didn't answer fast enough. She was already there. The baby's cries hitched when Josie leaned over, just for a breath, like it had caught something different in the air. Then, slow and uncertain, one tiny hand lifted, reaching, not toward the man, toward her. Josie froze. Something in her chest tightened so sudden it almost hurt. She hadn't held a child in a long time, hadn't been asked to. Still, her hands moved like they remembered what to do. She lifted the baby carefully, settling it against her shoulder. The crying broke once, twice, then softened. Not gone, but quieter, like the storm had lost its edge. Behind her, the man let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. The girl by the hearth looked up now. Really looked. Josie felt it, the weight of that stare. sharp and measuring. "You ain't from here," the girl said. "No," Josie answered softly. The man stepped closer, eyes moving between Josie and the baby, now resting against her like it belonged there. "What is it you want?" he asked. Josie hesitated. She had meant to say water, just water. But she looked down at the child in her arms, then at the blackened pot on the stove, then at the girl who hadn't smiled once, and something in her shifted. "If you've got flour," she said, "I can make supper." The man blinked. Josie met his gaze. "Steady now. Won't cost you nothing but what's already been ruined," she added, nodding toward the stove. "And if it ain't better than that, I'll be gone before sunrise." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, slowly, he stepped aside. "Name's James Carter," he said. Josie gave a small nod. "Josie Whitmore." The baby stirred against her shoulder. Quieter now, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Josie didn't feel like she was passing through. She felt like she had stopped somewhere. Josie woke before the sun. It wasn't a habit she'd chosen. It was one that had followed her from a life she didn't speak of anymore. Back then, mornings had meant warm kitchens, steady routines, a place where someone expected her to be. Now, it meant something else entirely. It meant proving she had a right to still be there. The Carter house was quiet. When she stepped into the kitchen, the floor cool beneath her worn boots. The fire had died sometime in the night, leaving the room with that hollow kind of stillness that settles in places where no one has the strength left to tend things properly. Josie set about fixing that first. She cleared the ashes, stacked fresh kindling, and coaxed the flame back to life with patient hands. By the time the first pale light slipped through the window, a pot of coffee was already beginning to breathe, low and steady, and a small round of dough rested beneath a cloth, waiting its turn. She worked without noise, without fuss, not like she was trying to impress anyone, more like she was remembering something she hadn't allowed herself to remember in a long time: how to belong somewhere. Behind her, the floor creaked. James stood in the doorway, shirt half-buttoned, hair still rough with sleep. He didn't say anything at first, just watched. "You don't have to do all that," he said finally, though there wasn't much conviction in it. Josie didn't turn. "I know," she replied. That was all. But something in that answer settled differently than he expected. He stepped closer, drawn more by the smell than anything else. Real coffee, not the weak, bitter scrap he'd been forcing down the past few months. "You been cooking long?" he asked. "Long enough to know when a man's been feeding his family wrong," she said, not unkindly. That earned the smallest hint of a smile from him. Behind them, a soft whimper stirred. Josie moved before he did. She found the baby awake, fists working at the blanket, face already scrunching toward another cry. Josie slipped her hands beneath the child, lifting her close, murmuring something low and steady, not quite a song, not quite words. The crying didn't vanish, but it eased. James leaned against the doorframe, watching that more closely than anything else. "She's been like that," he said. "Most nights." Josie glanced at him. "What have you been feeding her?" He hesitated. "Milk, bread, whatever I could." "That's too heavy," she said gently. For her size. She didn't say it like an accusation, just a fact. "I'll fix it," she added. Something about the way she said it quiet, certain, made him believe her before he had any reason to. Lucy came into the kitchen later, dragging her feet like she had somewhere better to be and nowhere to go. She stopped when she saw the table. Fresh bread, eggs, coffee. even a bit of something sweet, Josie had managed to scrape together from what little she'd found. Lucy's eyes flicked to Josie, then away. "I ain't hungry," she muttered. Josie didn't argue, didn't coax. She just set a plate down anyway. Lucy hovered a moment longer, then sat. She took one bite, then another. By the third, she'd stopped pretending. James noticed. So did Josie. But neither of them said a word. The morning stretched into work. Washing, mending, sweeping years of neglect, out of corners no one had looked at in months. James found himself stepping around her, more than speaking to her. Watching more than asking. It unsettled him. Not in a bad way. In the way a man gets unsettled when something broken starts to look fixable. By afternoon, the house didn't feel the same. It wasn't new, wasn't whole, but it was trying. Lucy stood in the doorway at one point, watching Josie hang washed cloth out to dry. "You ain't gonna stay," she said flatly. Josie paused, cloth in hand. "I didn't say I would." Lucy studied her for a long second. "People don't stay," she said. It wasn't a complaint. It was a rule. Josie nodded once, then went back to her work. "I'm still here today," she said. Lucy didn't answer, but she didn't walk away either. The sound of hooves came just past noon. Not hurried, not uncertain. The kind of steady riding that meant a man knew exactly where he was going and expected to be welcomed when he got there. James stepped out onto the porch, wiping his hands on a rag. Josie followed a few steps behind, the baby resting quiet against her shoulder. Lucy lingered near the doorway, watching everything without seeming to. The rider came into full view as he crossed the yard. Tall, broad in the shoulders, hat pulled low. Though not low enough to hide the way his eyes scanned the place before settling on James. "Well," the man said, as he swung down from the saddle, dust kicking up around his boots. "You still standing? That's something." James gave a short nod. "Didn't expect you this far out." Ethan Carter, older brother. He stepped forward, clasping James' hand in a grip that was firm but not warm. The kind men used when they shared blood, but not much else. "Had business north," Ethan said. "Figured I'd check whether you'd run this place into the ground yet." James almost smiled. "Working on it?" Ethan's gaze shifted, then casual at first, until it wasn't. It landed on Josie, and stayed there. For a moment, nothing moved. Josie felt it before she understood it. That weight of recognition. The way a past you buried deep suddenly rises like it never left. Her breath caught. Ethan's eyes narrowed, just slightly. Not surprise, not confusion. Recognition, slow, certain. "You," he said, quieter now. James glanced between them. "You know each other." Josie's fingers tightened instinctively around the baby's blanket. "No," she said quickly. Too quickly. Ethan didn't look away. "Funny thing about roads," he said, almost to himself. "You think they lead you somewhere new. Turns out they circle right back." Josie couldn't hold his gaze anymore. She turned slightly, shifting the baby. But there was no hiding from it now. Not really. Not from him. They didn't speak of it in front of James. Not at first. Ethan stayed through the afternoon, helping James check a fence line, talking about cattle and weather, and things that didn't matter nearly as much as what went unsaid. Josie kept to the house, worked harder than she needed to, avoided the window. But there are some things you can't outwork. It was near sundown when Ethan found her. She was out back, hanging the last of the wash. The sky stretched wide and orange behind her. She heard his boots before she turned. "You planning to tell him?" he asked. No greeting, no softness, just truth, laid down like a blade. Josie swallowed. "There's nothing to tell." Ethan let out a low breath, almost a laugh, but there was no humor in it. "Ain't that what you said that night?" Was too. The words hit harder than she expected. For a second, the world around her seemed to narrow to dust, to memory, to the sharp edge of shame she thought she'd outrun. "I didn't know you," she said quietly. "Didn't stop you?" She flinched, not from the accusation, from how easily he said it. Ethan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "My brother's got 2 girls in that house," he said. "He don't need this." "This," Josie repeated, barely above a whisper. "You think I don't see what's happening?" He continued. "You fixing meals, holding that baby, making it look like you belong." Josie lifted her chin then, just slightly. "I'm not pretending anything." "No," Ethan said. "You're worse than that." Silence stretched between them, heavy, unforgiving. "What do you want from me?" she asked. Ethan studied her a long moment. Then he said it. "I want you gone, before he figures out who you are." The words settled like dust after a fall. Josie didn't answer right away. She didn't trust her voice. From the house, the baby began to cry again. Soft at first, then sharper. Josie turned instinctively toward the sound. Ethan watched her. And for just a flicker of a second so small, it might not have been there, something in his expression shifted. But it hardened again just as quickly. "Morning," he said. "You're gone by then." He turned and walked back toward the house, leaving Josie standing alone in the fading light, with the past behind her, and something else, something far more dangerous waiting inside. The storm rolled in without warning. Out in Wyoming, it often did. One moment the sky stretched wide and empty, the next, it closed in tight, low clouds, dragging across the land, wind rising sharp enough to cut through wood and bone alike. By nightfall, the Carter house trembled under it. The shutters rattled. The fire hissed low in the stove, and inside, baby Rose burned. Josie knew the moment she touched her. Too hot. Not the restless warmth of a fussy child, but the deep, frightening heat that came from somewhere inside, where you couldn't reach. "She was fine this morning," James muttered, pacing, his voice tight in a way Josie hadn't heard before. "She was fine." Josie didn't answer. She was already moving. "Boil water," she said, "and fine, clean cloth, anything soft." James didn't question it, didn't hesitate. He moved, because for the first time in a long while, he didn't know what to do. The fever climbed fast. Rose's breathing turned uneven, small chest rising too quickly, little hands twitching against the blanket. Josie worked steady, though her heart pounded harder with every passing minute. Cool cloth to the forehead, warmth at the feet, slow, careful sips of water when the child could take them. It wasn't enough. Josie knew it. James knew it too. "I'll get the doctor," he said suddenly, grabbing his coat. Josie looked up. "It's near 15 miles. I don't care." "The storm," I said. "I don't care." There was no arguing with that voice. Not tonight. He turned to Lucy, crouching in front of her. "You stay here. You mind her." "You hear?" Lucy nodded, though her eyes were already wide with fear. James hesitated, just for a second. Then his gaze shifted to Josie. Not long, but long enough. "Don't let her," he started. He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Josie gave a single nod. "I won't." The door slammed behind him. And just like that, she was alone. The wind howled louder now, pressing against the walls, like something trying to get in. Inside, the firelight flickered, shadows stretching long and uneven. Rose cried weakly. The sound thin and strained. Lucy stood frozen near the table, arms wrapped tight around herself. Josie worked without stopping, but she could feel it, time running thin. Then came another sound, footsteps, slow, deliberate. Josie turned. Ethan stood in the doorway, coat damp from the storm, eyes unreadable. "You still here?" he said. Josie didn't answer. She dipped the cloth, wrung it out, pressed it gently to Rose's burning skin. "She ain't gonna make it without a doctor," Ethan said. "I know. And you think he's bringing one back through that storm?" Josie swallowed. She didn't stop working. Ethan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Come morning," he said. "I tell him everything." The words landed heavy. "Final." Josie closed her eyes for just a moment. There it was. The choice. She could leave now, slip out into the storm, disappear before James returned. Protect him. Protect his daughters from the shame she carried. That would be the right thing. The safe thing. The thing she had always done before. Run. Rose whimpered. A small, broken sound. Josie looked down at the child in her arms. So small. So helpless. Reaching for something she didn't understand. "I'm not leaving," Josie said quietly. Ethan didn't react at first. Then, "You think staying makes you better?" Josie shook her head. "No," she said. "I think leaving again would make me worse." Behind her, something broke. Not wood, not glass. "Lucy?" A sharp cry tore from her as she dropped to her knees, hands pressed over her ears. "No, no, no." She rocked back and forth, panic rising fast and wild. "She's gonna die." Lucy gasped. "She's gonna die like Mama." "Everyone leaves. Everyone leaves." Josie moved without thinking. She laid Rose carefully in the cradle, then crossed the room in 2 quick steps, dropping down in front of Lucy. "Hey," she said softly. "Look at me." Lucy shook her head violently, tears streaming down her face. "They leave." She choked. "They always." Josie reached out, but didn't touch her. "Not yet." "I did once," she said. Lucy froze. Just for a second. Josie's voice didn't shake. "I left," she said. "And I lost everything because of it." Lucy's breathing hitched. Josie leaned closer. "But I didn't run tonight." Silence. Heavy. Real. Slowly, so slowly, it almost didn't happen. Lucy leaned forward. Into her. Behind them. The storm raged. The fire burned low. And in the middle of it all, Josie stayed. James didn't remember the ride back. Only the storm. The wind cutting sideways. Rain hitting hard enough to sting. The horse fighting every step, like the night itself was pushing them back. By the time he reached the house, soaked through and half blind from it, his hands were numb on the reins, and his heart had been beating too fast for too long. He didn't wait to tie the horse. He ran. The door swung open under his hand. Heat hit him first, then light, then the sight of them. Josie sat near the stove, Rose cradled against her chest, wrapped tight in blankets. The child's breathing was still uneven, but not as wild as before, not as desperate. And Lucy was asleep, curled against Josie's side, one small hand gripping the edge of her dress, like she was afraid it might disappear if she let go. James stopped, just stood there, taking it in. Something in his chest shifted, deep, quiet, final. "You made it back," Josie said softly. Her voice sounded tired, worn thin. but steady. James nodded once. Stepping closer, he reached out, brushing his fingers lightly against Rose's cheek, still warm but not burning. The doctor, Josie asked. On his way, James said. Couldn't get him sooner in this weather. Josie nodded again, like she already knew. From the far side of the room, a chair scraped. Ethan. James' eyes moved to him. The silence changed. What's he still doing here? James asked. Ethan didn't answer right away. He studied his brother instead, like weighing something. Waiting, he said finally. For what? Ethan's gaze flicked once to Josie, then back. For the right time to tell you the truth. Josie's hands tightened around the baby. Not enough to hurt, just enough to hold on. James looked at her, then back at Ethan. Say it, he said. No anger. Not yet. Just something harder. Ethan stepped forward, slow and deliberate. You brought a woman into your house, he said. You let her near your girls. You trust her. James didn't move. And you don't know a damn thing about her. I know enough, James said. Ethan shook his head once. No, he said. You don't? The room felt smaller now, tighter, like the walls had leaned in just a little. It was her, Ethan said. The words landed plain. No dressing them up. No, James said. Without thinking, Ethan didn't flinch. That night, he continued. The one I told you about? The one I wasn't proud of? James' jaw tightened. He remembered. A night years back. Whiskey. A woman whose name Ethan hadn't kept. A mistake he'd brushed off like it didn't matter. Until now. James looked at Josie. Really looked this time. Not the woman in his kitchen. Not the one holding his child. The one with something behind her eyes he hadn't asked about. Not until it was too late. Josie met his gaze. Didn't look away. I didn't know it was him, she said quietly. Ethan let out a breath. That don't change what it was. No, Josie said. It doesn't. Silence stretched, long, heavy. Lucy stirred slightly in her sleep, her fingers tightening in Josie's dress. James saw that. Saw everything at once. The baby breathing easier. The girl who hadn't trusted anyone in months. Holding on. And the woman sitting there not running. Not hiding. Waiting. You done? James asked Ethan. Ethan blinked. What? You said what you came to say. James' voice stayed even. Now, you're done. Ethan stared at him. You serious? James stepped forward. Not toward Ethan. Toward Josie. I ain't asking about what happened before she walked through my door, he said. I've seen what's happened since. Ethan shook his head. You're a fool. Maybe, James said, but I'm not blind. He crouched down in front of Josie, close enough now to see the fear she hadn't shown before. You planning to leave? He asked. Josie swallowed. That depends, she said. On whether you want me to? James held her gaze. Longer this time. Steadier. My girls run to you, he said. Not away. His hand rested gently over the blanket around Rose. You stayed when you had every reason not to. He shook his head once. I don't care what came before that. Ethan scoffed softly behind him. James didn't turn. I'm choosing what I see, he said. And what I see is a woman who kept my family standing tonight. Josie's breath caught. Not loud, but enough. Lucy stirred again. Half awake now. Her small voice came, rough with sleep. Don't send her away, she murmured. James closed his eyes for just a second, then opened them. And that was that. The storm passed the way all storms do. Out on that stretch of land sudden. leaving the world behind it quieter than before. By morning, the sky had cleared. Rose slept easier, her breathing steady at last. The doctor came late, mud-caked and tired, and said what Josie already knew. She'll be just fine. Life didn't change all at once. It never does. But something in that house had settled into place. Ethan left 2 days later. He didn't say much before he went, just stood by the gate, hat in hand, like a man carrying more thoughts than words. Before mounting up, he glanced once toward the house, toward where Josie stood in the doorway. There was no apology, but there was no judgment left, either. He nodded once, then rode off. The wedding came quiet. No grand plans, no long guest list, just a handful of folks from the nearest town, a borrowed preacher, and a patch of open ground beneath a wide Wyoming sky. James stood stiff as a fence post through most of it, hat turning slow in his hands. When the preacher asked if he had anything to say, James cleared his throat and managed, "I ain't much for speeches, but I'm staying." Lucy leaned over from where she stood beside Josie and whispered, just loud enough, "You're supposed to say you love her." A few chuckles passed through the small crowd. James glanced down at her, then back at Josie. "Well," he said, "a little rougher this time." "That too." Josie laughed then, a real laugh, the kind she hadn't heard from herself in years. Time moved the way it always does, quietly, steadily, without asking. The ranch grew stronger. So did the people inside it. Lucy lost the sharp edges in her eyes, replaced by something lighter, something closer to the girl she might have been before loss found her. Rose grew into a sturdy, laughing child who followed Josie everywhere, never questioning where she belonged. And Josie. She stopped looking over her shoulder, stopped waiting for the moment everything would be taken again. Because it wasn't. Years later, when the house stood fuller voices, laughter, the sound of boots on the porch, and children running through open doors, Josie would sit beside James in the evenings, watching the sun sink low over the fields. His hand would find hers without thought, like it had always been meant to. "I almost kept walking that day," she said once. James nodded. "Glad you didn't." Josie smiled, eyes on the land stretched wide before them. She had lost a home in a single night, once, but this one she built slowly, day by day, by choosing to stay. And in the end, that made all the difference.